The MP28 bridges the gap between the slower firing, more medium range and accuracy focused SMGs and the close quarter menaces for which the class is best known for. As such, it sits somewhere between weapons such as the MP34 and EMP and the Tommy gun and Swarmy, which is an interesting spot to be in the first place, but more importantly of course is the question, should you be using it in Battlefield 5? And to answer that in our usual weapon review fashion, we're going to be looking at the stats of the MP28, the specializations available and that I would recommend for this weapon, how it compares to some of the competition out there, specifically looking at the SMG class of weaponry, and of course last but certainly not least, how to get the most out of this weapon when using it on the battlefield. But starting things off as we always do with the weapon stats of the MP28. It has a maximum damage of 25, a minimum damage of 13.2, the usual kind of damage model you would see on most SMGs in Battlefield 5, giving it of course a 4-shot kill up into and including 10 meters, from that point onwards until 30 meters a 5-shot kill, between 30 and 50 meters a 6-shot kill, between 50 and 75 meters a 7-shot kill, and from that point onwards a relatively poor 8-shot kill. In terms of its fire rate, unsurprisingly, this is a relatively fast-firing SMG at 670 rounds per minute, and it isn't gimped by an unusually small magazine either, with 30 shots available in the default magazine configuration. In terms of your reload times, the short reload is pretty competitive at 2.4 seconds, the longer reload at 3.4 is less appealing and should definitely be avoided in more close quarter scenarios. Now in terms of recoil, this weapon essentially is exactly what you think it would be. As it is a more close quarter focused weapon, it has a relatively noticeable vertical but more importantly horizontal recoil, with vertical recoil on a per shot basis of 0.6 plus 0.05 additional for each consecutively fired fully automatic shot, and in terms of horizontal recoil, that is to the left and right, you're looking at 0.375, a value comparable to an upgraded Tommy gun, so most definitely not a extremely stable and easy to control weapon, the MP28. Then lastly, in terms of the spread values, those are exactly what you would expect from your average SMG, with 0.15 while aiming down sight and standing still for your minimum spread. Your minimum spread for doing the same but moving simultaneously is a little bit higher at 0.3, and your hipfire value, that is hip firing while standing and moving simultaneously, sits at a minimum spread of 1.2. In terms of your specialization choices, the first is between slings and swivels, giving you 15% faster weapon switching, and quick aim, giving you 33% faster ADS times. Then if you go down the left hand side, you're looking at the polished action, giving you more sustained accurate hipfire, and of course the extended mag, increasing the magazine size of this weapon from the previously mentioned 30 all the way up to 50. Then if you go down the right hand side, you get the custom stock, improving your accuracy while aiming down sight and moving simultaneously, followed by the ported barrel, giving you a decrease to the horizontal recoil of this weapon. Then your last choice is between the enhanced grip, giving you more accurate hipfire, and the lightened stock, giving you 60% faster movement while aiming down sight. In terms of what I would recommend, this is of course absolutely dependent on how you wish to use this weapon. If you wish to use the MP28 as alternative to the Tommy gun and Swarmy, thus focusing almost exclusively on close quarter, a left hand side build, especially going for the mag upgrades and of course the hipfire upgrades, is most likely your best choice. Then again, if you want to take advantage of this weapon's slightly lower fire rate and slightly lower recoil to somewhat create a weapon capable of competing with some of the close quarter focused SMGs, at the same time not quite as restricted in terms of at what distances it can put out decent damage, then you're going to be wanting to focus on the more right hand side of this specialization tree, which is also my personal recommendation, thus going for quick aim, custom stock, ported barrel, followed actually by the enhanced grip, because a little bit of extra hipfire accuracy has never hurt anybody. So the weapon stats are relatively unsurprising, in that the fire rate somewhat dictates in Battlefield 5 what kind of recoil and what kind of spread values you should expect, and the weapon damage models are of course based entirely on the class of weaponry in which it sits. What may surprise you though is that this weapon sits somewhat in limbo between the previously mentioned more medium range, accuracy focused, slower firing SMGs and the close quarter menaces, the Tommy gun, the Swarmy, and it sits in limbo not only because of its fire rate but also because of its recoil, as in many ways it behaves and performs like a close quarter weapon, but then again doesn't quite have the same damage to output that some of the other close quarter weapons has, but at the same time can take on targets at slightly further distances. You're clearly engaging in a trade-off. So most interestingly, of course, the weapon comparison for the MP28 is between it and the Tommy gun, which is only a slightly faster firing weapon at 720 rounds per minute versus the 670 rounds per minute that this weapon has. That is, however, a noticeable difference and something that in close quarters can absolutely decide who wins a firefight. The other notable differences between these weapons are of course stability, as the MP28 has significantly lower recoil in its most typical configuration versus that of the Tommy's most typical configuration, because it should be noted that the Tommy with the horizontal recoil specialization has as much horizontal recoil as the MP28 without its horizontal recoil specialization, but that wouldn't exactly be a fair comparison anyway. The last point to mention, of course, is the magazine sizes. This is also how these weapons frequently differentiate themselves, because if you use the MP28, as I do, on a more accuracy right-hand side focus, you'll be looking at a 30-round magazine, whereas the Tommy, the way I run it at least, is equipped with the 50-round magazine upgrade. Which leads us nicely into how this weapon really performs, where it performs best, and how you should use it to get the most out of it on the battlefield. Now, in many ways, the MP28 sits between two weapon categories, two engagement distances. In many ways, however, it is very much a close quarter weapon, because yes, while it extends its ideal engagement distance, say 5 or 10 meters beyond that the Tommy gun can cope with, and most definitely over that what the Suomi can offer, it is very much still a relatively inaccurate weapon at even medium ranges, with weapons such as the MP40, the EMP getting recent changes and upgrades, becoming extraordinarily accurate when tap fired and burst fired correctly. The MP28 very much feels like it always has, and very much behaves like the Tommy gun in many ways. Burst firing this weapon, tap firing this weapon isn't going to greatly aid you in taking down targets at medium ranges, which usually means that the engagement distance at which you can full auto is most likely the engagement distance you should be using this weapon at. Anything beyond that is likely an engagement distance at which almost everything in the game is going to outdamage you, and you better just duck for cover and try and close the gap than actually take on your target. That for some will mean that the MP28 doesn't really have a place and they'll just prefer to use the Tommy gun. For others, this means that the MP28 is an alternative to the Tommy gun, which comes into play or is your ideal choice on maps and game modes where you find yourself engaging consistently in close quarter, consistently in extreme close quarters, but also find yourself taking on targets at close quarter medium ranges, 25, 30 meters quite frequently, and find yourself possibly being outgunned by some of the assault rifles or somebody even using the MP28. This is where this weapon can absolutely shine, because it is not useless, it is just simply occupying a relatively small niche, trading quite a bit of damage output for a little bit extra engagement distance of the Tommy gun, and of course more notably the Suomi as well. I for my part am not a massive fan of the weapon, but absolutely will equip it occasionally if the situation, game mode and combat distance warrants its use. But that pretty much wraps it up for the MP28, and I'd love to know what you think about this weapon, and if you use it extensively on the battlefield, or if you seem to just stick to the Tommy gun as most Battlefield players, including myself, tentatively do with Medic. So leave that, as well as of course your usual feedback and suggestions down below in the comments, or hit me up with them over on Twitter. If you found this video helpful, enjoyable or interesting, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next Battlefield by video.